Welcome to Unraveling Relationships, Emotions, and Desires. I am your host, Dr. Sheila Hodgwin-Dover. Today, we are basically doing tech support for the human brain and hopefully avoiding having to tell anyone to simply turn it off and on again. We are tackling a subject that is filled with misunderstanding, post-traumatic stress disorder. We've all heard about post-traumatic stress disorder, and we've all heard the myths that PTSD is a sign of weakness and that it only affects soldiers or that it's a life sentence. We're here to debunk the misconceptions, clarify the myths, and discuss the unseen wounds. To lay the foundation for our discussion, we will start by dispelling some of the most common myths surrounding PTSD. But before we dive into our discussion, I'm going to let our distinguished guests just introduce themselves at the moment and say anything they would like to say about themselves and what they're doing with their life right now.
Hi, my name is Shanti Hubbard, and I am an LPC licensed in Texas, Oklahoma. My main population, I work with trauma, specifically domestic violence and sexual assault.
Hello, my name's Sojetta Bood. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in Texas, and I'm currently working in North Dakota as an MFLAG in an Air Force base.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for introducing yourself. So we're here to debunk the misconceptions, as we said. So before we get any further, I would like to say the first myth I would like us to focus on is that only soldiers get PTSD. What do you all think about that first myth, that only soldiers get PTSD?
It's not true.
You got to prove it.
Well,
I,
when you think about it, oh,
but Marita?
okay. So guys, let me tell you one thing. I'm suffering with allergies. So if I mute a lot, it's because I'm sneezing. Everyone experiences trauma, at least, everyone has experienced some form of trauma in their life. So that is a myth that, only soldiers can experience trauma or get PTSD. Sorry.
Thank you for sharing, Marita. Shanti, you were about to go next. You can speak anytime you wish.
Well, real quick, I wouldn't say that everyone experiences trauma, but also specifically if they do experience trauma, doesn't mean they'll be diagnosed with PTSD because two people can be involved in a car accident and one person never drives again because they were that shaken by what happened, and the other person gets in the car 2 seconds later. So not everybody that experiences trauma gets PTSD, but I would say actually a really high percentage of people who do get PTSD are victims of sexual assault.
So the myth that is only soldiers, you're 100% sure it's a lie. What about your death? Are you canceling out that myth, debunking that myth completely?
Yes, I do think it depends on how you respond to trauma, and soldiers are not the only ones who experience trauma.
Unfortunately, I have to agree with you all. I was hoping that I would disagree with you all because I want to play the devil's advocate today, but I have to agree with you all. The myth isolates countless people who suffer in silence. While we deeply honor the trauma of combat veterans, PTSD does not discriminate. It does not know color. It does not know gender. It's vital we recognize that trauma comes in many forms so that everyone affected feels empowered to seek the help they deserve. Because if we say it's only combat, then other people would feel uncomfortable seeking help because they'll feel guilty thinking, well, I'm not a soldier, so I should not have PTSD. I've also seen soldiers who have been afraid to seek help for PTSD because they did not go to experience combat and they feel, oh, I didn't experience combat, so I should not have PTSD. Has anyone, if you ever heard of that, or heard of soldiers being afraid to seek help for PTSD?
Very much so, especially when they're transitioning out. Some people don't want to have that on their record permanently. Some people do, because they want to get that higher percentage for their time. But a lot of people are shamed. That's why, for me, around me, the people know we aren't allowed to use the word crazy because that stops people from getting help. So a lot of people
Right.
feel you get that diagnosis, then they're deemed as crazy or have a very short fuse and they can't be around people or around certain things. And it's not always true.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing. And before we move on to the second myth, I I know by now you all know that I am obsessed with the fight, flight, or freeze, and I added a fabulous to it. Fight, flight, freeze, or fabulous. So how does PTSD keep someone stuck in the trauma response, later with the fight, flight, or freeze? Or fabulous, which I am adding.
Okay. I didn't want to be the only one talking. Um, so I would say, depending on what their trauma was, they can constantly feel like they can't move. And by freeze, people literally assume body can't move, but it can look like not making decisions, not capable of sticking with decisions. Also, flight can look like not just physically leaving a space, but maybe even relationships. Like they may feel like this person is really safe. I don't know what this is like, so I need to get out because it feels too good to be true before they hurt me.
Thank you very much for sharing. If anyone else wants to add anything to it, if not, I'm going to move on to the myth number two. Myth number two is PTSD means you're broken forever. And I'm going to say, because Shanti is going to share her story, I don't want her to respond to this one. I want her to omit this one since she's going to tell her story. PTSD means you're broken forever. What do you think, Odette or Marita?
I disagree. I do believe in healing. So I wouldn't say you're broken forever.
Ah, that's cool. Thank you for sharing. Marita?
I just think it's a normal reaction sometimes that your body has when something has happened to you, that is traumatic, So I don't believe I don't believe that it means that, someone is broken forever.
Mm-hmm.
We get injured and we heal. And, I just see room for healing, and healing can come in so many different forms. It reminds me of that. I've seen something, I think it's a Japanese, and this cup, when it's broken, they use gold to kind of put it back together.
Mm.
And so, that kind of reminds me of it, that sometimes, we don't go back to exactly how we were, but we just go back to another form, that, can be helpful, I think, in the end.
Such a powerful and harmful myth to overcome. So, Marita, I really agree with you. Reframing PTSD from a life sentence to a season of healing is central to recovery. So we have to reframe it. Otherwise, people will just assume that they're doomed forever. And this concept, connects so deeply to aging. As our bodies and lives change, old wounds can resurface in new ways, not as failures, but as a new chapter in the healing journey that requires different tools and compassion. So I think that the four of us all agree, even though I didn't allow Shanti to give her response, since when she give later on, we're gonna hear whether she feel like she is doomed, if she's broken forever. We're gonna hear what she really thinks later on. All right? Right, Shanti?
Right.
All right. So let's go on to the third myth. People with PTSD are dangerous or unpredictable. Now everybody can share on that one. People with PTSD are dangerous or unpredictable. What do y'all think?
One of my favorite phrases is that all behavior makes sense in context. You just have to know the context. So if you don't understand what they've been through or their own behaviors, then yeah, it can feel unpredictable. Not dangerous. Everybody's not dangerous. Everyone's capable of being dangerous, but everyone's not dangerous. But if you don't know what to expect, then it can feel unpredictable.
I like what you just said, that everyone is capable.
Mm-hmm.
People would disagree with that one. I wish I could have disagreed with you, but I unfortunately I agree with you. I know I'm capable.
Everyone's capable of anything.
That's right. Everybody has the good, the bad, and the ugly side. You just choose when you want to. Sometimes you choose which side you want to display, and sometimes you are pushed to the limit.
I
Exactly.
think too, um, a lot of times when we watch like movies, we watch things on TV. They kind of portray people with PTSD in a bad light, so everyone just assume that someone who suffers from PTSD is a bad person. Come to think of it, they do that a lot. The villain of the story is the soldier who had PTSD and didn't get training, didn't get what do you call it, help, and goes out and does such and such and such. So I think the media does a lot sometimes to kind of portray that myth too.
That is true. Especially to make movies more entertaining.
I would agree.
Okay, did you have anything to say about this one, Ade?
I think it's a reaction of protecting yourself. I don't see it as harming. So I don't think they're dangerous. They're just trying to protect themselves.
That's right. Okay, so before we move on to the fourth myth, I'm going to ask a question to play the devil's advocate a little. How can faith communities offer a time to embrace, because Ecclesiastes says there's a time and a place for everything under the sun. How can faith community offer time to embrace the trauma survivors rather than judgment? So religious organizations. Shanti, I like to bring in the religious side.
I would say by educating and bringing awareness.
That makes a lot of sense. Because a lot of times, religious organizations would not necessarily put it in their schedule to have time to educate their followers about trauma.
I think sometimes too they can have probably offer more support and be empathetic, because to be honest, there's a lot of people, a lot of religious people, and not all, who don't believe in mental illnesses, and they would tell people, that's the devil in you. You need to pray that devil out, etc., etc. Nothing against people of faith, because I am one myself, but sometimes you encounter those types of stereotypes and myths, when it comes to these things. So I think more empathy, is needed, and support, you know.
Yeah. Okay, so before we go to the fourth myth, how does the fight, flight, or freeze response explain why some people experience PTSD, seem on edge, or emotionally numb sometimes?
If you're constantly worried about if your environment is safe, that's going to keep you on edge because you need to make sure you know where every exit is, who every person that walks in that door is. And until you feel like you're prepared for, to them, it feels like every danger, but as many dangers as you can, then you're not going to be able to just enjoy what's going on around you.
Thank you for sharing that insightful comment, Shanti. So let's move on to the fourth myth. If you don't have flashbacks, you don't have PTSD.
Not true. There's a whole assessment, and that is not the only thing on it.
Some people think, a lot of people think if you don't have flashbacks, you don't have PTSD. Some people really think that.
Nope. PCL5 does not just have a couple questions.
Sure. Anyone has anything else to add, or everybody agree with Shanti?
I agree. I mean, think about it. Um, a thought just came to mind. It's just one of the symptoms. You know, like for instance, I'll use this example. Right, we know what UTIs are, right? And some people, when they go to their doctor, the doctor would say, "Hey, you have a UTI," but I don't have any of the symptoms. That says that I have a UTI. Does that negate the fact that it is a UTI? So not everyone has flashbacks.
Thanks for giving us that example. Okay, so let's move on to the fifth myth. You cannot develop PTSD from small traumas. You cannot develop PTSD from small traumas. It has to be big traumas for you to develop PTSD.
Who is holding that measuring stick?
That was a quick one, Shanti.
I already had it before.
I know, right?
Trying to let that measuring stick. How dare you tell someone how big their trauma is?
I know. All right, do you have anything to say?
It's like telling someone how much they should grieve. A lot of times people measure other people by their own measuring sticks. I agree with Shanti.
Mm-hmm. All right, do you have anything to add to that one?
Absolutely. I think you're your own, your own context of the trauma that you experience.
That's right. So I too disagree with that. This myth invalidates so much real pain. The wisdom of a time to weep is that it doesn't rank trauma. It doesn't say it has to be, you can only weep for big traumas and not for small traumas. It simply creates a space for grief to exist. And this becomes acutely relevant to later life when we will have to grieve a lot. When the busiest of a career of raising a family fades, there can be a profound silence where unresolved pain from the past finally demands to be heard, making it feel suddenly sharper and more urgent. So the pain could be small, it can be large, it can be recent, it can be from a longer period of time, but nobody can tell you that your pain, the trauma was too small for you to have PTSD. Okay, so before we go any further and change the direction, I'm going to ask, how does the concept of a time to weep validates those whose trauma was dismissed as a bad, as it wasn't bad enough, it wasn't big enough for you to be feeling any pain?
Well, a big phrase that I tell my clients all the time, especially when they try to say, "Oh, my pain isn't as big as someone else's. Oh, I know other people had it worse." I tell them, and I have the quote in my office, no one person's pain is greater than the next. At the end of the day, hell is still hell. Your hell looks different than someone else's hell. That doesn't mean you're not still burning. So if you didn't realize that before right now, you're allowed to cry whenever you get that urge to cry.
I like that. So those are the five myths, the five main myths that I found that I kind of felt is good for us to debunk. Do you have any other myths that you would like to share? If not, which myth do you think caused the most harm and how can we replace it with compassion?
I would say two things. Some people think that children can't get PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
Inaccurate.
Yep.
Out of the myths that we discussed, I would say a really big one that harms a lot of people is that only soldiers can get PTSD. It sometimes hurts soldiers too, because if a soldier, let's say they did get deployed multiple times, or maybe they didn't see any quote unquote action and they still develop PTSD, it's, well, you didn't go to war, or you're still alive, you should be fine.
I totally agree with that point that you just made. So the truth is, it's time for us to have a little break. And we will pause. Okay, so Marita, you were going to comment about what Shanti said.
Yeah, I like what Shanti just said about soldiers who have gone to war and those who have not gone to war. I've personally heard a lot of that myself when we look at PTSD. and the soldier, a lot of times they compare themselves to each other, and it makes things even more worse because this person has been to war 5 different times. Does not mean because you have not seen war that you cannot have PTSD. Yeah, so that was pretty much it. I like that reference because I haven't heard it in a long time, but I remember I heard it, from people in the past when I was in the civilian world working.
Very good point, Marita. Okay, so Shanti, it's time for us to focus on you now. Your journey and scholarly work are so inspiring. If you feel comfortable still, we would be deeply honored to hear your experience navigating PTSD. Your perspective as a scholar and individual would be so valuable. So you have the floor now, and we can ask Shanti any question she said afterwards.
You just want me to like tell my story?
Anything about, yes,
Okay.
anything you're willing to and comfortable sharing.
Well, I consider myself an open book, so I don't mind sharing anything. It's just a lot. I would say if we're starting at childhood, my parents were divorced, and they've been divorced since I was about 6 months old. Very long custody battle, so 16 years of custody battle, and there was a lot of trauma on both sides, mom and dad. I felt like a rag doll. Felt like if I wasn't here, then they would be able to live happier lives because they wouldn't have to deal with each other because my dad caused my mom a lot of pain. Um, Going into intimate relationship stuff, I've been sexually assaulted more times than I can count, but definitely a lot happened in my marriage. I was married to a soldier, so we're also talking about the PTSD stuff. I was married to a soldier for almost 6 years, together almost 7, and there was every form of abuse that occurred. The one form of abuse that didn't happen until after we got divorced was that he strangled me in front of our children. Um, and that led to in my opinion, long, because my area works with a lot of domestic violence, sexual assault victims. I know I've seen longer trials. So ours lasted about 2 years. Well, it's technically still going. Um, but like I said, he strangled me in front of the kids after we got divorced. So when people say just leave, it's actually safer to stay. Um, what else?
I want to emphasize that point that you just said.
Mhm.
People always say, why did you stay? Why didn't you just leave? And they don't understand that it's a lie that you're safer.
It is. As of 2023, I haven't checked that number since I've done a training, but as of 2023, you're 75% more likely to die if you leave a domestic violence relationship. So it is way safer to stay. That doesn't mean just sit there and stay. It just means we need to try harder to find safer places for people to get out.
Yes, and then you also need to have a plan.
Yeah,
I like to say, wise women don't just get up and leave. They come up with a plan. Unless your life is in like imminent danger right there at that moment, life or death then. But if it is not,
you can still plan.
yes,
I physical and emotional safety plan with my clients all the time. Like one thing my supervisor taught me, she had a client that her abuser used to make her terrified when he would drive. And she got to a point where the car was moving. She would just open the door and run out. And she was like, okay, let's just wait till the car stops. And then you got a safety plan the best ways you can given your circumstance. So let's just wait till the car stops. And you could probably get out a little safer.
okay, that one is funny. I probably shouldn't have laughed, but I've never heard anything like that before. I mean, okay, yeah, that's desperation. She's desperate.
Definitely, literally.
Okay,
So
okay.
I would,
Audrey, did you have anything to say before Shanti continue with her story?
I think it's a lot easier for us to say, just get up and leave, but you really don't know what a person is going through. I like to use the model of grief when you're going through any change, any drastic change, because it's a lot of different emotions going on when you're preparing for something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the I always use this with a lot of people just to try to get them to understand like why some people stay, and just like what to piggyback off of what Shanti said when she talks about, and you also when you talk about having a plan, I tell people, unfortunately, this would be unfortunate. I'm walking down the road and for some reason I get kidnapped, right? What is my main goal? My main goal is to get home safely. I'm going to be planning out things in my mind how I'm going to do that. But if my captor say jump, you betcha I'm going to jump. I'm not going to fight back because what is my goal? My goal is to escape and to get home safely. So sometimes it's just not as easy as, hey, I'm going to fight back and then I'm going to be out of this relationship. I believe planning and effective planning can go a long way. So that's something that I always use, and that seemed to kind of put things into perspective for them. You have to have a goal, you have to have a plan. What is that plan for you? What is that, for you? What does
Marita,
that
you
goal?
Marita, you actually just point back to one of my favorite theories, fight, flight, or freeze. And to
Mm-hmm.
Ecclesiastes, there's a time and a place for everything. You have to know when it's time to fight. You have to know when it's time to freeze.
Mm-hmm.
You have to know to fight or flight or freeze. You have to know when it's time for either one of those. So the stress response cannot just be an automatic response during trauma. Otherwise, you might choose the wrong response. So you have to know as
What to do.
what you're doing or when to do it and say, yep, this is not the time to
And
fight.
I think too that I use that because when I was starting my university journey at the University of the Virgin Islands, one night I came out of a psychology class and she'd finished late. It was after 9, and I had to catch a bus just to get me to the road that I needed to walk up to. And it was really close to the university, but I decided not to walk it. So the bus came, and what I did, I sat behind in the bus.
Mm.
And I realized in him moving, coming close to my road, he decided to speed up. So I'm ringing the bell, ringing the bell. He is not responding. And I'm climbing over the chairs,
Mhm.
and I'm pounding on his window. I actually got up close and I'm pounding on his window. And it was one of these open buses. And my mind was like, do you jump out? But if you jump out, this is what's going to happen. You're going to go under the wheels and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
sometimes in moments like that, you have to stay calm and you have to think out a plan. Eventually, he stopped the bus because other people saw, I was in distress and they called out to him and he told me that, he forgot. I was like, what happened? I was ringing the bell. I was beating on your head on the glass. And he said he forgot. And I was like, okay, but that was a shock, in
Yeah.
me. And I just eventually had to walk it home. So I like using that story because it's something personal, to me, but I don't let them know that it's personal to me. And
Mhm.
so, what is the goal? What is the plan? Safety. I was thinking about my mom. I was thinking about never seeing my family again. My goal was to see them again, not dead. Well, not them see me dead, but to see them again, alive. So,
Thank you, Marita. Okay, Shanti, you have the floor again now. You said a very important point that gave a in-depth response.
Which I'm always happy to do. Um, as far as top of my head, traumas, there's a lot more detail to each of those, which I'm happy to answer if there's any questions. I would say school has always been my happy place. I've not always been happy, but school has always been my happy place, and I've done really well. I have two masters, one in counseling psychology, the other in forensic psychology. I got the second master's in forensic psychology because in working with domestic victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, there's a lot of questions that go into the legal system. Why do they do this? How is this happening to me? It doesn't make sense. I don't like not having answers to questions. So I decided to go get a degree so I could give those answers in more layman's terms to my clients. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot. It helped me be able to do an international presentation about sexual assault,
Mhm.
which I'm proud of. And a lot of information was gathered that day.
So how were you able to concentrate and focus on 2 degrees while dealing with trauma?
So interestingly enough, my first master's, which actually technically trauma with all of my degrees, bachelor included, but with my first master's, I got a 4.0 for my entire for all 2 years. And it was at that time I experienced the worst of my abuse with my ex-husband. I was being sexually assaulted multiple times a month, and I'm talking maybe even multiple times a week at different times. Self-harmed really bad. I attempted suicide a couple times, but when I'm at school and doing the work, it always made me happy.
That's powerful. But most people would say, I could not get a degree because I was dealing with so much trauma. But you're saying
I had to.
personal education helped you deal with your trauma.
And I don't ever use like some people will use what their experiences are to tell people that, oh, I did it, you can do it too. Just because I did it doesn't mean you can. And
Hmm.
if I did it doesn't mean you have to. Like even with my little people, I don't use what I've done as an example of you have to. Like my kid came to me the other day and was like, I'm so glad you're not one of those moms that gets mad with a B. And I'm like, for what? I know what you're capable of, and I know when you are doing your best. If your best is a B, your best is a B. Go for it.
Good. So did you ever experience any of the classical symptoms of PTSD?
All of them.
Can you elaborate if you're comfortable?
Avoidance, well, I mean, it's hard to avoid the person that you're living with, but I loved to be able to be away. So going to school was a method of avoidance. Flashbacks, I would constantly get flashbacks, dissociated quite a bit. I would have nightmares. Um, wasn't able to complete ADLs because in those sexual assaults, sometimes I would hope that if I was dirty enough, he wouldn't touch me. And it would last for a little bit. Sometimes he still would, but it would last for a little bit. And then I would finally take a shower and then it happened. I'm like, oh, should have waited another day. Um, what else? Hypervigilance, hypervigilant everywhere, especially after he strangled me in front of the kids. I was looking over my shoulder constantly. I made sure I had safety plans for all over my house. If he comes in this window, where do I go? If he comes in this door, where do I go? I couldn't have any shirts or necklaces around my neck. I would have panic attacks. Um, Irritable. I'm literally going through the PCL in my head. Um, I was irritable, crying all the time. Off the top of my head, that
Hmm. So what have you done other than education, formal education? What have you done habitually to help you cope?
so I've been in therapy. I fully believe that therapists need therapists. Been in therapy. I have amazing friends that I would not be here. And I know I said I attempted, and yes, because sometimes the pain is just that bad. Also, September is Suicide Awareness Month, so in case anybody didn't know, um, I am so grateful for every friend that I have. My best friend, we've been best friends. We just hit 27 years a couple days ago, and she is my everything. Like one psychology class, they asked us to define love, and I used my love for her. Mind you, I was actually married at the time, but define love with her. So,
That's really powerful. Marita or Audit, do y'all have anything to ask Shanti or any comments?
oh, and another thing that kept me alive was my clients, being able to help my clients.
Okay, but that is interesting because I know when I was in graduate school, we were taught that if you're going through trauma, you need to take a break and focus on yourself before you could help others. But you're saying helping your clients help you deal with your trauma. Is that what I'm hearing correctly?
Absolutely. And yeah, I got told that too. Um, and a lot of people will say you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to love you before you love other people. All these very cliche things. And they're not coming out of a bad place,
Hmm.
but you know what can actually bring someone out of something. Seeing it's that being needed, being in a, yes, it was a traumatic space for them, but being in a healthy, safe place where I could be heard, where I could give someone an opportunity to not feel alone like I felt, that helped me.
Thank you very much for emphasizing it. Well, okay, now we'll pause a minute and let Marita or Odette, if they have any questions or statement to ask.
I don't have any questions, but thank you for sharing your story. I know it was something very personal and it's very empowering to see how you're very resilient and making a big difference with your clients now.
Thank you.
I think one of the things I have to say is that sometimes we can see people and we don't really know what they're going through. And so that's why it's important not to judge, because I would have never known, because I've never met Shanti personally. But when I think of her, I'm always thinking of her as strong. She has a lovely smile, but sometimes you don't know what people are dealing with or had to deal with, you know, um, throughout their lifetime. So resilience, when I think of that word, I think of Shanti, and I think of everyone else who's dealing with stuff differently. And it goes back to that measuring stick that Shanti, had talked about earlier. It's important for people not to use their measuring stick to measure other people, because we just don't know, you know.
Absolutely. And I constantly got that statement, even going through grad school. Like I said, when it was the worst of it, none of my classmates knew. None of, ironically, actually, one of my classmates ended up becoming a client. And I made sure, like, are you sure this is not, but Southwest Oklahoma, it very limited amount of people that can do what we do.
Hmm.
Um, Domestic violence counselors.
Hmm.
But no, I had no idea. And they're not supposed to. Like, I've also, another traumatic thing, I mean, it was traumatic for me. It's not about me, but like traumatic for me. I did lose a client to domestic violence, and that hurt me really bad. So that was really hard.
That is tough.
Yeah.
How did you cope with that?
Well, at first I didn't. So I would say that was the start of when I've ever had a panic attack. I remember going to sleep, having a nightmare, waking up into a panic attack, making myself go back to sleep, went to sleep in a panic attack, woke back up in a panic attack. It was hard. Unfortunately and gratefully, my supervisor had also lost someone to domestic violence a couple years before me. And having someone that gets it, there's nothing like it. So being able to discuss those feelings, being able to ask them, okay, how did you get through this?
Hmm.
And I honor them. Like it's a vague picture, like you wouldn't know who it is unless you know. I keep their picture high up in my office as a method of like, you're still watching over, you still get to be a part of all these people that I have a say over.
Yeah, that's powerful. So you've developed your own techniques that you did not learn in graduate school.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
As we always say, there's no cookie cutter solutions for personal trauma.
No. And they can't prepare you for everything.
Correct.
I have a unique perspective being that I have experienced so much. I'm able to help clients when they're not able to think outside of, like, get out of their own head to be able to see different kinds of scenarios. I can offer different methods because unfortunately I've been there. Like
Mm-hmm.
I say, I'm so good at my job because I have experienced so much abuse from this one person.
Mm-hmm.
But there was an area where I used to say, I don't have that experience. Unfortunately, now I do.
Mm-hmm. Sad. That is sad that you've
It,
had to experience it.
very. And sometimes you don't know how bad your trauma is until you're speaking to people. Like I remember I held one of my, it was one of my first, but I used to have to do group sessions for the domestic violence agency I used to work for. And I was sharing a story that I thought was like pretty simple with my clients. And I was looking around the room, then I happened to like look at eyes and everybody's mouth was open. And I was like, oh, it's that bad. Okay. All right. Okay. But everybody got it. Like everybody gets it because most of them had had a similar experience. But sometimes you just don't know until you talk to somebody else.
That's true. Okay, Shanti, I'm so humbled and honored that you've taken the time to share this intimate story. We all admire your strength and your wisdom. But before we wrap up, is there any other thing you would like to share with the audience to help them learn the importance of understanding PTSD and how to cope with it?
Couple of things. So I mentioned I got a 4.0 while in grad school going through all that I was going through. I also had three kids that were 3 and under. My ex-husband at one point did also deploy. So it was just me and the three kids. And I think this also, so I'm big on telling my clients everything does not happen for a reason. Like I know people say that phrase and it gives some people comfort, and I don't mind when it gives you comfort. But to put that on other people, I can give you a whole lot of things that you can't give me a good reason for. But
Mm-hmm.
a whole lot of reasons for bad things too. But I think everything that I've been through, from the trauma with my parents to my marriage, has made me a better mother, a more present mother, a mother that's able to see the bad but still allow her children to live. My mother, with the trauma that she experienced, she became someone that sees all the bad and puts all the bad on you. You
Mm.
know, not on you horribly, just like I walked to the store in high school and my mom was like, you could have been hit by an 18-wheeler. I was like, you couldn't just say a car? Like, we had to say 18-wheeler. Okay. That's the kind of extreme thinking my mom does. And unfortunately, I do have those thoughts in my head sometimes, but I have never let that bleed over into my children. My children are amazing. They're intelligent. They've all skipped a grade. One of them's in GT, one of them's in Model UN. They are amazing. And just like looking at me, looking at them, you would have never known that they saw what they saw, that they've ever felt scared. Even with what's going on between me and their dad, I don't talk about him in a negative light with them. I still speak about, you were born in love. Your parents loved each other. They love you. You know where your dad's flaws are. I don't have to go there. If they ask questions, I'll answer age appropriate. But I'm so proud to say that everything I've been through has not been led over into them.
Wow, that's powerful. Shanti, thank you so much for sharing your story with such honesty and courage today. Your insights were incredible, not just incredible, but also powerful, and will undoubtedly resonate with our listeners. We are all so grateful for your time and your profound openness. I cannot find the words to thank you and let you know how much I appreciate you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. So
Thank you.
before we officially wrap up, I'm going to let our distinguished guests, other than Shanti, give the final words. Anything you would like to share? Where can people find you? What are you working on? Anything you would like to share about yourself? This is the final wrap up. Final countdown. Marita.
Well, one of the things I'm doing, and hopefully I get to finish it, is well, I love working with older adults.
Mm-hmm.
And so I am on the last leg, if I could get my participants, of my PhD. And so, what I want to say about PTSD is that I think it's important for us to give people space and not rush them to be silent or to deny, their trauma. because just like how no two persons' fingerprint are the same, no two persons are the same, you know. And so I just want people to remember that, let's give each other grace and not, re-traumatize anyone else by making them believe that what they went through is, small or not incomparable to another person.
Thank you very much, Marita. I always appreciate your insightful ideas and thoughts.
I think this was a very powerful topic. I think it's important for us to have awareness. I was working with Border Patrol agents prior, and a lot of them were very discouraged to seek help because they believed that they were going to get their guns taken away and put into an office desk job. So it's important for people to know, the myths and the reality of things and how they can seek support.
Thank you very much, Odette. Oh my goodness, I am so honored to hear you today and to have you share your insights and to mention part of your experience working with the border support. Are you comfortable saying how long you worked there?
I was there for 6 months.
6 months, okay. And did you enjoy it? I know that's
Yes,
a
I
simple,
did.
simple question. All right, okay, good. All right. So, Shanti, any final words? I'm coming back to you.
No, just Marita made a good point. You never know what someone's going through. So compassion first.
That's right. That's
And
right.
because we're all therapists, but even in everybody's regular life, most people just need someone to listen to them.
That's true. What I'm going to add to something that Shanti says, Shanti uses learning and education as one of her main coping mechanism. I would say for me, writing is my thing. Writing is my therapy. I can just document all my thoughts and try to find a humor in the trauma if it is traumatic. And then when I'm finished, I'm just laughing out loud from what was traumatic. And the best part about it is finding somebody who's interested in reading your story too. Like Shanti loves to read my stories. And I share with her and I feel so good when she responds back and she can laugh with me. So everybody has to find what's gonna work for you to help you cope with any trauma you're going through. It doesn't have to be because it led to PTSD, but if you don't find a way to cope with it, it can lead to PTSD. So, so once again, I want to thank each and every one of you for your vulnerability and your wisdom. The conversation was so powerful because of the distinct and valuable viewpoints each of you brought to the table. Thank you for your time and the generosity. Thank you so much for joining us and for being a part of this important conversation. I cannot find the words to say thank you enough to each of you for being here and sharing your thoughts with us. So guess what? Join us again next time on this station for unraveling relationships, emotions, and desires. Life isn't just about fight, flight, or freeze. It's about finding your fabulous. Until next time, keep unraveling the extraordinary. Visit us at www.unravelred.com to continue the conversation and stay fabulous.